Hey, everybody. Hope everyone had a great weekend. This is Mr. Sheets Radio reporting live. Uh, we are going to begin the next unit now. Well, it's actually only a day because I'm going to give out the study guide tomorrow, which will be Tuesday, the 24th. This is continuing. This is the very last chapter, I guess, of the Gilded Age. And then we'll have the test over the age of industry in America. So here's what we're going to do. So here's the topic: politics of the Gilded Age. Um, Probably a lot more interesting than you think it's going to be because the politics in America at the time were just as dirty as the streets. So you are going to need some notes and actually get a notebook where you can just keep adding to it. And I know a lot of you already have that. That's great. But I can't give you these fill in notes over the internet right now. I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I'll do that soon. But anyway, today we're just you're gonna take notes based on what I tell you. Okay. So anyway, titled this "Politics During the Gilded Age," and make sure you put the date. So this is gonna wrap up everything before the test. Now, the test is gonna be pretty depressing stuff, and as you know that, I mean, America was not in a good shape during this time. But after this, things really start lightening up. I'll explain that later. You'll have to forgive me. My voice is going out a little bit. I promise I don't have the virus as far as I know. But anyway, this is a picture that I've showed you before of Rockefeller apparently taking over the world through his monopoly. And then here you have these monopolists for each industry, like steel and um, Calpin Trust. I didn't go over what that was. Standard Oil, everything, all kinds of industries just turning into these giant monopolies, and the government just terrified, kind of not knowing how to become more powerful than these monopolists. So this is all about how today's lesson is all about how these guys up here were able to become so powerful. How did businessmen become more powerful than our own government? So politics during the Gilded Age. So you need to know. Hang on a second. I'm going to adjust this. Hopefully you can hear me, but you need to know what laissez-faire means. So before the Gilded Age, the government and economists believed in a laissez-faire economic model. So this was today. I mean, hardly anybody actually believes this. A lot of people still do, but some economists believe that the government should be totally absent from the economy, meaning hands off. Laissez faire in French means hands off. And it's also an economic theory that the government should not be involved in the economy at all, that pure capitalism is truly going to make people super rich. And if the business that they're running isn't good, people will stop buying and the bad business dies. But it's pretty hard to stop a bad business when a monopoly is born, because then you need the stuff they're selling and you don't have a choice. So the business can't die. The business has become more powerful um, than anybody wanted it to be. So make sure you know what laissez-faire means. It means hands off, and it means the government should not interfere in the economy at all. So if you need food, or lost your job because you broke your arm or something, under the rules of laissez-faire, the government's not supposed to help you. This is how these businessmen were getting so wealthy. Government in the Gilded Age only interfered when it was beneficial to the economy, like when Congress passed the Pacific Railway Acts to fund building railroads, as we talked about before. So, this wasn't a full blown laissez faire economy, but it was more laissez faire than it is today, and probably, hopefully, more laissez faire than it ever will be again. Um, So yeah, like I said, you don't have to know this. You might want to make a little side note here, but The laissez-faire economic policy naturally created monopolies and trusts, which are bad. Um, I take back what I said. You do need to know the difference between a monopoly and a trust. I do remember telling you I'd explain the difference later. So they're practically the same thing. Even today, when you go to college, most professors will use the terms indifferently. But if you really want to be specific, a monopoly is when one person owns all of the means of production, meaning everything it takes to make that product, that person owns. So they're not paying anybody to make the product. An example would be Edison making his electricity and buying up all of the coal mines so that he wouldn't have to pay anybody money to make his product. So he owned the coal mines to make the electricity. And then a trust is what you already think a monopoly is. It's when one person owns all the businesses producing the product. For example, if monopolies were still allowed, then Jeff Bezos basically could have, or Bill Gates, whoever, could have everything under his name. So everything could be an Amazon product, like even your broccoli. So the next, oh, I forgot to mention, you should probably be pausing these videos um, to take the notes, okay? And do not take, word for word everything unless you're one of those people. I am, but it's not going to be necessary. Um, for the next unit, I'm going to try to do some more hands-on kind of project-based assignments, but I could not find anything online for this topic. But the spoils system is the main idea of what we're talking about today. This spoils system is what allowed the economy or the businessmen to be more powerful than the government. It was because of this spoils system that people like Rockefeller were able to maintain their control over America. So the spoils system is this: it is winning the government officials. Sorry, winning government officials. Yes. Sorry, my computer screen is like a giant like TV and my face is really close to it, so I have to like sit back and Taylor, get off your phone. Thanks. So anyway, the spoils system is when let's I'll give you an example. Let's say me, Mr. Sheets, has paid Donald Trump lots of money for his campaign. Somehow I racked up $2 billion, and I paid Donald Trump $2 billion for him to win. But I didn't pay for his campaign because I wanted him to win. I paid for his campaign so that hopefully he will pick me to be the leader of the Department of Education in the government. So that's the spoils system. So let's say Donald Trump wins the next election and he looks at who paid him the most money for his campaign and he sees that I did. And so he'll give me a call and he'll say, "Hey, I saw that you helped me out with all that money. Would you like a position in the government?" And I'll say, "Sure." And so now Mr. Sheets is in charge of the National Department of Education. Even if I don't have any qualifications, that's how the spoils system works. So hopefully you get that. It says, why was the spoils system the reason monopolies continued to exist and robber barons like Rockefeller maintained their control over America? So think of how, based on all the atrocities that I said were being committed by these robber barons, how did the spoils system make it last so long? The government should have shut these people down long ago before they ever got that powerful. How did the spoils system make it almost impossible for the government to shut these monopolists down? So think about that. This is going to be a test question. If you're still thinking, you can pause the video. But if you have your idea, here's the answer. It's because Rockefeller was paying leaders off, basically saying, "I'm going to give you this much money for your campaign as long as you put my guys, the puppets, in for me, and they're going to bow to every wish. So it was kind of like Kim Jong Il being put in charge of North Korea. Sorry, Kim Il sung being put in charge of North Korea by Stalin, and Stalin saying, "You do everything I tell you." So Rockefeller was paying these leaders, these presidents, and it wasn't just Rockefeller, it was Carnegie and Vanderbilt as well, saying, "I'm going to pay for your campaign as long as you put my guys, the guys I want, into office to be in charge of the economy and stuff." So you have a bunch of government officials just bowing down to these guys and their money. And later at the end of this lesson, you're going to watch a little video on a guy named Boss Tweed, one of the most famous spoil system politicians in American history. So here's an example of how this goes. Kalena, put the phone away. So anyway, this spoils system here. White House. So here's your, and it doesn't have to be the White House. It could be the Capitol building of Ohio or any state, or even your town hall, the Washington courthouse. So here is your politicians saying, "Hey, Mr. President, I'm going to give you lots of money for your campaign. And if you win, you have to reward me in favors, government jobs, government contracts, subsidies. You don't really need to know what all this is. Just know that if these guys are giving money and support to a president here or a leader, a town mayor even, and the town mayor wins, then the town mayor or the president or whoever is going to put these guys in office or bow down to their wishes." So that's called the spoils system. Now, Americans everywhere felt trapped in a nation of glorified slavery where the government didn't help them at all. Of course, that is laissez faire beliefs where the government shouldn't help. Well, if the government is not fixing itself because of the spoils system, and the government is not helping because of the um, laissez faire economic beliefs, you're going to have a rise in a new political system called anarchy. And so during the late 1800s and early 1900s, you have people called anarchists rioting in the streets. They have totally lost faith in the U.S. government and how corrupt it has become. So these anarchists, and there's still anarchists today. I think it's safe to say they're pretty much morons, but they believe in the total absence of government, meaning that any kind of authority or government establishment whatsoever should be abolished, and everybody should it just should be um, everyone for themselves um, kind of society. Now there's some anarchists that are radicals that believe that, and then there's some that are like, okay, maybe a little bit of authority, but all in all, anarchy means that. So these anarchist riots took place all over America, and sometimes these riots were violent. Um, we'll talk about this later in the year, but anarchists will actually assassinate one of our presidents in 1901 because the president is the enemy of any anarchist because they are the leader of the nation. You need to know what anarchists are. So you can pause this video, make sure you know what anarchists are. Make sure you know what the spoils system is. Make sure you know what laissez faire is. Now, let's talk about the second president to ever be assassinated, and it has to do with the spoils system. Um, know that this guy here, James Garfield, who, by the way, I'm looking like right now, James Garfield won the 1880 presidential election. Hey, that's the time period we're talking about. And his vice president was Chester A. Arthur down here, looking exactly how you'd expect a Chester to look. So this was his vice president, and here's the new president, James Garfield, who was in fact not an orange cat that likes lasagna. So Garfield was someone who wanted to destroy the spoils system. He wanted to put laws into place which would block government officials from hiring friends, helpers, and anyone who wasn't qualified. You need to know this. You do not need to know that excuse me, Arthur wanted to keep the spoil system, but just reform it. You don't need to know that. Just know that James Garfield up here wanted to completely abolish the spoil system and make it illegal. But that's not an easy task. How do you make the spoil system illegal? It's pretty complicated. How can you be sure that these politicians aren't just hiring people and doing favors for rich people? And you can also argue that politicians today are still involved in the spoil system. So, anyway, Garfield, right here, is going to be the second president to be assassinated after Lincoln. What do you need to know? Sorry. You need to know this, and you need to know who Garfield was. James Garfield and his vice president, Chester. So, his assassination. A lawyer, as you can see over here, who definitely looks like he's about to assassinate someone. His name was Charles Guiteau. It's a French last name. Charles Guiteau had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars helping Garfield, the new president, win the election. Guiteau never made a deal with Garfield, but Guiteau, the assassin, expected a government job in return. So this Guiteau guy wants to form the government. I don't really know what he was trying to do, but he was usually when you're involved in the spoil system, you're out for yourself. You're not truly trying to help the people. So after Garfield wins the election, this Guiteau guy is ticked because Garfield never hired him into the government. Uh, because Garfield wanted to destroy the spoil system. I don't know why this madman, this obvious madman, um, was paying so much of his money to Garfield, knowing that Garfield wanted to destroy the spoil system. So Garfield was in a Washington D.C. train station on his way to Massachusetts when he walked maybe 10 steps into this train station, and Guiteau knew he was going to be there, and he sneaks up behind the president and shoots him right in the back. So here's Garfield, and then there's Guiteau, and he shoots the president right in the back. Now, interestingly, this guy back here is Abraham Lincoln's son. So this guy here, Abraham Lincoln's son, witnessed his father's death, which was the first presidential assassination, and then witnessed the second presidential assassination. And interestingly enough, Lincoln's son will also be present for McKinley's assassination. So he got to witness three of the four presidents who were ever assassinated. Now, when Garfield was assassinated, he didn't die. He fell, well, when he was shot, he didn't die. He fell down and he was shot and he was kind of like squirming all over the place because that's what happens when you get shot, apparently. So you're on this filthy Gilded Age train station floor, and you have 12 different doctors rushing to the scene, knowing that the president has been shot. Guiteau is quickly apprehended and arrested. And these doctors, they're all pretty much taking turns digging into the president's back with all these filthy, like not even washed surgical um, utensils, trying to get this bullet out of Garfield's back. Now, had these doctors just let the wound heal, the president probably would have survived. But they were all just digging into his back with their fingers and these filthy, unwashed utensils with dried blood on this dirty Gilded Age train station floor. Um, so finally, they send the president Garfield to a hospital bed, and they request this new doctor, and it was actually Lincoln's son that's like, here, I know a guy. His name was Dr. D. Willard Bliss. So here's his new bed, and here's the doctor right here, D. Willard Bliss. Not Dr. D. Willard Bliss. Now, what was the D? The D stands for doctor. His name was literally Dr. Willard Bliss. So if you ever get injured and your doctor's name is Doctor, run, because I'm about to tell you what's going to happen. Dr. Willard Bliss and many doctors at the time said germs weren't really a thing. Bacteria was fake. What caused disease was bad air, like the Great Stink of London. So he continues to perform these unsanitary surgeries on the president. Interestingly, like he thinks the bullet is in the wrong side of his back, like the other side of his back, which he's not even shot in. So he was doing unnecessary operations as well. He was digging in the president's back for days when the bullet wasn't even in the that wasn't even the right side of the president's back where the bullet was. So this guy, this poor president, is just like, just please let the wound heal. You know, Jackson several years before this died with like 6 bullets in him. So anyway, the president starts getting abscesses all over his body because he has these very disgusting bacterial infections from all these unsanitary surgeries. He has stomach illnesses now where he can't keep anything down, so he's very frail. Um, um, they actually called Alexander Graham Bell in, and he has this new invention. You know, we talked about the age of inventions. This is the time period where he just invented the metal detector. And so he comes to the president to try to use his brand new metal detector to find where the bullet is. And the metal detector is just beeping off the charts, and they cannot figure out why. And he's like, it must be broken. Later, they found out, and this was after the president had died, that this was one of the first beds with metal springs in them. So most beds at the time didn't have any metal springs, but this one did, which is why the metal detector was going off the charts. All they would have had to do was just move him to a different bed, and then they would easily find where the bullet is. But by this point in time, it was too late anyway. He was going to die from infection. So like I forget how many weeks later, 2 months later, 2 months after Garfield was shot, he dies. 2 months later, he died from infection, not even a bullet. So if they would have never operated on him, he could have survived. Guiteau was hanged soon after, um, and after Garfield died, his vice president Chester A. Arthur becomes president. So here's Chester in his final form, um, and he's going to completely make the spoils system illegal. Now you got to keep in mind, after Garfield died, the nation just came together. A lot of people in the South were still sour about the Civil War, but when Garfield died, the whole nation was mourning. It was really one of the first times in American history after the Civil War where the nation finally agreed on something. And the whole nation agreed that in order to fix the Gilded Age and make it clean and give workers their rights, you're gonna first have to get rid of the spoils system. So Garfield's death wasn't for nothing. Because he died, the nation, North and South, woke up and realized we have to get rid of the spoils system in order to heal this nation. So know this. This is important. This is one of the first progressive legislations passed uh, to fix the Gilded Age. So Arthur, Chester A. Arthur, the vice president, now president, helps create and pass the Pendleton Civil Service Act, and it stops the spoils system. It's still in effect. It says that federal jobs, meaning the bigwig jobs, are given through merit and performance-based testing instead of favors. I'll have to look more into it. I'll write a note here to see how it's used today. How do you prevent this from happening? How do you prevent the spoil system from happening today? I'll update you guys on that tomorrow. Uh, but back then, and I don't know if they still, I think they still do it today. Federal jobs are given through merit and performance-based testing, meaning if I paid Trump during his campaign to become the leader of the Department of Education, Secretary of Education, sorry, um, I would first have to pass some kind of test, not so much being approved by the Senate, but proving that I am not in it for myself, or that I'm not going to, you know, you don't want someone like me, for example, running the Department of Education. You want someone professional, someone, I'm just joking, someone, I don't know, I think I'd be pretty good at it, to be honest. And then you'll need to know the next, because you started getting rid of the spoils system. A few years later, you have Benjamin Harrison, the next president after Arthur, passing the Sherman Antitrust Act. Now, this one was pretty big. It made monopolies and trusts illegal. So you need to know what the Pendleton Civil Service Act was and the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's pretty easy. Antitrust Act. You can no longer be a big monopolist. So this is why if Google or Microsoft or Amazon gets too powerful because of this act, the government can now come in and break those companies up and say you're going to be competitors now. You're not going to be one big company. However, when this was passed in 1890, it's actually going to take around 10 years for it to be enacted or enforced. So just because they passed this doesn't mean the monopolies are going to be extinguished, because they don't instantly become extinguished. The monopolists definitely put up a fight. So it's actually going to be Teddy Roosevelt, this guy, when McKinley's assassinated in 1901 by an anarchist, will become president and just completely destroy these monopolies. And he is going to be one of the most important presidents in American history. He's going to clean the streets up. He's going to give workers their rights. He's even going to be an advocate of black rights as well, which is going to surprise a lot of people. He's going to be one of the most progressive, one of the most liberal presidents America's ever had. But his most important accomplishment was definitely breaking up those monopolies. So the American government is now regaining control of the economy, um, and we even get a little bit of socialism as well. So that is that. Now you need to make sure that at this point, you're going to learn about Boss Tweed. He's pretty much the face of the spoils system. You're going to learn a little bit about him. There might be something on the air test about him. I can probably You probably have a huge chance of something about the spoils system being on the air test, the Antitrust Act, the Pendleton Civil Service Act, anything governmenty is probably going to be on the air test. So make sure you know everything on here. Your notes should be filled out at this point, covering everything we talked about. Your assignment is this, and there's one question in here that's really important that I'm going to assess you on. So you're going to be watching this video that is attached to the Google Classroom post called "The Story of Boss Tweed," and then also attached is the worksheet that you need to do with this. So when you're done, email this to me and title it "Spoils System." Okay. Now, there's one question I'm going to assess you on, and it's um, I'll let you know. I forget the exact wording, but it's on the worksheet, and I'll put a little hint there, okay, to make sure you know
Happy
what you're
Monday.
talking about when
I
you
hope
answer
everyone
that
had a
question.
good weekend.
Everything else is
Here
pretty
we
much
are,
completion grade, unless it's obvious
second
that
week
that
into
you
this
made up
shutdown.
Hold on.
Hope
I
that
will be
you guys
definitely
are
checking
getting
that
something
question
out of
over
this
with
and
Dr.
actually
McCoy.
watching
So
these.
I will give you your
I
next
don't have any
assignment
idea if they're going to make you
Tuesday,
take
which
the
will
air
be
test still.
a study guide for
I
the
hope they
Gilded
do
Age
so I can figure out
test where I stand as an educator with this stuff.
So any questions you have,
Um,
please put in the comments and make sure that you
so I don't know what's going on, but we're going to continue going through this.
Thank you.
Just know that you have a test on Thursday. That's this Thursday.